Producer Terry Ellison. Want to mention off the top, we're going to be streaming on YouTube like we did the last couple of days, but also now on Facebook Live. So as they've entered that functionality where you can chime in and ask questions, we want to hear from you exactly what you want to hear. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can along the way. But Terry, we're now basically in the midst of this system.
Yeah, so it has arrived, and as we expected, we said this yesterday, a slower start than we thought maybe 24, 48 hours ago. So this morning, obviously, it was fairly dry, fairly quiet, and just now the rain is starting to come in, certainly west of town. They're starting to see some showers. I still think that for the next several hours, it's going to be a very slow ramp up. So yes, some light rain coming in. I think by mid to late afternoon, some of that rain will turn to sleet. North of the Pike and specifically in northern Worcester County, but don't expect any major wintry weather impacts until after sunset, I think.
So looking at the radar right now, if we could flip over to our weather graphics, we actually, in the Berkshires and really Route 2, Franklin County, and into southern Vermont, New Hampshire, that Connecticut River Valley there, radar is suggesting that we have some sleet and snow falling.
Let's keep in mind that, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So the radar beam is actually, now this is an hour product, but the radar is shooting several thousand feet up. So when you get out to, there's not a radar that's located in northern Worcester County or in the Berkshires. So we're actually looking several thousand feet up. So it's entirely possible that that snow or that sleet is actually rain. It's probably very close.
Yeah.
That's when we need some what we call ground truth and folks on the ground saying, telling us exactly what it is.
And it's really going to be hard for places like Greenfield, like Bernardston, and northern Franklin County as you cross over, towards Keene or Dover, Brattleboro. It's going to be hard for it to accumulate initially, just because it's battling the sun, it's battling the warm days that we've had the last couple of days. So that's why some of our totals have kind of been cut. We can't just take those snow maps that we see that sometimes are plastered on the internet. We can't just take those as gospel.
Yeah, this is why a lot of folks, I think, actually, could you bring up a temperature map? Just curious what the current
Yeah,
are.
Of course.
But a lot of folks, in the common critiquing of weather forecasters, they'll say, oh, you just take the models and put them on the air. Well, if we did that, trust me, the forecast would look a lot different than it does now. And as you can see, temperature is currently in the low to mid 40s in most areas.
38 in orange, but still, it's going to struggle to accumulate there.
Yeah, so at any rate, the model data is, you have to take it for what it's worth, and then you have to sort of use some experience and think, okay, it's April 3rd. So on April 3rd, with a temperature between 38 and 44, the radar may say snow, it may even actually there may be some wet flakes mixed in, but nothing consequential is really going to happen for the next several hours.
So got a comment on Facebook from Shira. Forgive me if I spelled your name wrong, but she says it's raining. So I'd be interested to hear where you live. And then Beth in Hopkinton says it's sleeting.
Interesting.
In Hopkinton.
So the atmosphere it's so borderline for this event, and this is not uncommon for this time of year. Again, we said this yesterday. If you think of the atmosphere as a layer cake, so what we have during this storm is we have cold air way up high, where the actual precipitation is coming out of the clouds, it's snow. And then as it comes down, there's a warm nose of air right around, meteorologically speaking, around 750 millibars. This is probably between 5,000 and 10,000 feet up in the sky. There's an area, a layer of that layer cake that's above freezing. So the snow is falling down, is falling into that layer that's relatively mild and melting into raindrops. And then on its way down, it comes in contact with colder air again. In some areas, in other areas, it's not cold enough. So in some places, you might get those sleet balls, where in other places, it might fall as liquid water. So I think we're going to see a wide variety of precipitation, really all afternoon, all evening, and overnight.
Yeah, exactly. This is, to Terry's point, I'm pulling up the different layers. Let me see if I can find the right graphic here. These are the layers, the layer cake.
The layer cake, exactly. So right now, the area at the surface, as you just saw, is actually fairly mild. So, but as the day goes on and as night comes on, it's going to cool to, say, between 33 and 36 degrees. So the snowflakes melt into rain, and then they fall through colder air, freeze into little pellets, and all night long, especially areas north of the Pike, you're going to hear that ping, ping, ping off the cars, off the house. A lot of sleet. In the initial hours of the storm as the rain picks up again for this evening.
So on the screen right now is our latest snowfall forecast. we reserve the right to tweak this as new information comes along. One discussion that we had live this time yesterday was, is it trending a little bit colder, where some of that sleet may transition over to some snow? And perhaps we were debating live here, do we have to kind of nudge some of the totals up a little bit closer to maybe 495? And we ended up doing that for the afternoon. I still think that, just looking at some things live on air right now, I still think that Route 2 and north, and then as you go into New Hampshire, still going to be the jackpot zone for us.
Absolutely. So anywhere that's elevated, I'm thinking of towns like Ashby, Ashburnham, parts of Fitchburg, West Fitchburg, any of those areas in Northern Worcester County or northwestern Middlesex County that have some elevation, 500 to 1,000 feet, that's where I wouldn't be shocked to see several inches of snow accumulate, very wet and pasty, weighing down the limbs, and of course, we'll probably talk about the winds in a little bit, but with wind gusts everywhere overnight, 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, I wouldn't be shocked to see several power outages in those higher elevated areas.
Absolutely.
I still say the biggest wild card with this storm is that 1 to 3 area up in, say, northern Middlesex, northern Essex, from, say, Westford to Lowell to Lawrence, even very southern New Hampshire and Nashua. Because that area is going to flip over to snow tonight, but how quickly does it flip? How much snow is able to accumulate, especially because a lot of it will be falling during the day tomorrow.
So circled here in the purple.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked. Eric and I were talking about this last night. That is our forecast. That's what we think will happen. But I wouldn't be shocked if somewhere in that 1 to 3 band we end up getting 4, 5, or even 6 inches of. It just depends on, again, how quickly it changes over, how readily it accumulates.
So we're getting some comments in on Facebook. As I mentioned off the top here, we are streaming on YouTube and on Facebook. Chime in. We love to hear what's happening in your neighborhood. You really help us out when it comes to the ground truth of things. So Marjorie asked about Buzzards Bay. So we'll get to that in just a sec. But currently raining in Attleboro, raining in New Bedford, sleet in Holden. So we have some frozen precipitation really north of the Pike, Hopkinton, as you go 495 towards Holden. And then, let's see here. David, sounds like he's in Florida because he says it's 91 today in South Beach.
Oh,
County.
thanks, David. Yeah. That's a crucial piece of information there in our forecasting.
The Merrimack Valley, do we need to get the blower going again? As Terry just mentioned, that's the question mark zone that we have. That it potentially could be a bust or boom area. We're pretty confident.
Yeah, I would say unlikely,
Right.
but this is classic weather forecaster speak. I wouldn't rule out in northernmost Middlesex County, up near the New Hampshire border, I wouldn't rule out a few areas getting 3 inches or a little bit more. But overall, up around that 495 belt up there, I feel like we're probably talking a coating to an inch or two of slop and slush, not something you would snow blow per se.
Right.
But it is coming towards the end of the storm. It's not like it's coming at the beginning and then going to get washed away by rain. So whatever we do get snow-wise will probably stick around for just a little bit.
So Joan says it's hailing in Sharon. It's sleet. How bad will the coastal flooding be on the New Hampshire seacoast? So one of the things that I've been covering quite a bit is, sea level rise, our beach replenishment projects from the seacoast, Hampton Beach, Portsmouth. It's a really big impact, right?
Yeah.
And Salisbury, they've taken a really big hit. I expect that to be a pretty big impact. Maybe not so much coastal flooding, but just beach erosion. That persistent northeasterly wind likes to tear away at our beaches, and they are becoming pretty fragile nowadays. It doesn't take much.
Yeah, it's been a terrible winter up there on the coast of New Hampshire, coast of Maine, and even down towards Salisbury. They've just been battered time after time again, and that's more so because we've had a lot of southeasters. So we've had a lot of storms that have come up and push the water and the wind in a southeasterly direction. This is a nor'easter, so a little bit different. However, the timing of this one is such that during the morning high tide tomorrow, which is about 7:30 a.m. up that way, the winds will probably be peaking from Cape Ann through southern Maine. So whereas overnight, I think the strongest winds are probably Cape Cod and along the immediate coastline, east coast. Tomorrow morning, I think the winds are peaking Cape Ann northward, and that's right during high tide.
Right. I do want to throw it out there to everyone tuning in, especially on Facebook. If you have the ability to horizontally film a video, send it into us, tag us on Twitter or Facebook or whatever it may be. We have a broadcast coming up in about 50 minutes on WBZ, and we'll try to share those in the evening too. We love hearing what's happening in your neighborhood, and we'll definitely try to use as many videos as possible. So tag us on Twitter, just obviously provide that permission. Ashland, heavy sleet in Ashland, so it's creeping closer to us.
Interesting, and again, these are with surface temperatures in the upper 30s, low 40s, so that tells you that that sleet layer, that warm nose, is a pretty thick layer. The snow's coming down, it's melting, and then it's freezing over and falling as these little ice pellets. And it's probably going to be sleeting there for, if it's already happening, you're probably going to see sleet for almost the entire afternoon and evening. Now, sleet doesn't really accumulate like snow does, but if you get several hours of it, you could get an inch or two of just, ice pellet accumulation. Fairly unusual, but certainly could happen.
I'm wondering, Terry, as we look at this radar right now, is if this is sort of bright banding a little bit right along 495, if we're getting that sleet changing over. So sometimes when you get melting snowflakes, they give off this signature on radar that makes it look like it's moderate to even heavy rain, but it's actually the melting snowflakes. It's the reflectivity.
The correlation coefficient that might give us a better idea of where the sleet is coming in.
Yeah, I mean,
so those bright areas in West Boylston, Leominster, Barry, that's sleet. That's definitely sleet there. So what that's showing is just the different precipitation types. So where you see the difference in color, again, up there in Westboro, that's most likely sleet. And again, sleet is not really a real hazardous precipitation type. It's ice, but it's ice balls. It's not like the freezing rain that it hits the surface and freezes on contact. Thankfully, the temperatures at the very ground level this storm are going to remain slightly above freezing, so we shouldn't see much of that.
All right, so let's step you through our Futurecast. Let me pull that up, and we'll walk everyone through the timeline for things.
I know we're probably getting... So it's funny, like this... I just came out of a morning news meeting, and while the storm was sort of top of line, everybody's still talking more so about the eclipse here. I don't know out in the general public if that's the case, but we will have a little bit of an eclipse preview after we talk about this.
So here's our Futurecast model showing. I'm just going to kind of step us through that rain snow line. Something we track in every winter storm. Sometimes it plays in our favor where it's really definitive. That rain snow line is far to our south and we know everyone's going to get some snow, or it's far to our north, everyone gets rain. This one comes into play, and it looks like we do switch over to maybe all sleet as opposed to wet snowflakes too at some point this afternoon. And then as the system really starts to wrap up and draw some cold air in overnight.
Yeah, so here's when it gets interesting, right? So midnight and shortly thereafter, up in that place that you circled on the map. So northern Middlesex, northern Essex County. If we truly are snowing at 2 a.m., and this, I know the model says it, but it may or may not be true. If it's truly snowing at 2 a.m. and we get several hours of moderate to heavy snow up there, then during the nighttime hours, it could accumulate, at a decent clip.
Absolutely, that is the wild card zone, and it looks like it could potentially even be some heavy snow too.
Yeah, it's going to be
1-2 inches an hour sort of thing. And then as the sun rises, we start to taper off a little bit. Still, maybe some snowflakes in Boston, but we talked about it the last couple of days. It's hard for snow to accumulate in the month of April in Boston for a couple of reasons. The sun angle, it's going to be battling the sun angle. It's coming off some warm days. So all of that plays against us really getting any sort of accumulation. It may fall, it's just not going to pile up.
Not to mention in a nor'easter, hence the term, the winds are coming off the northeast, which is off the ocean in Boston. And so, the ocean isn't real warm right now, obviously, but it's warm enough that it really, if you have any sort of wind off the water in April, like you're not going to be able to accumulate snowfall in the city.
Absolutely.
So you can see that area, like it's the model hangs on to snow for a good portion of the day tomorrow. Again, mostly north of the Pike, and then eventually later in the afternoon, up near 495, Lawrence, Lowell, Haverhill. So during the day, probably won't accumulate much, but if it keeps going all day long, certainly. Will be interesting to see, that zone, how much snow they end up getting.
Absolutely. Let me flip over to Facebook, see if we have any questions. Let's see here. I'm scrolling back up. We're getting a lot of folks in. Really appreciate everyone tuning in, Facebook and YouTube. All right, so Northborough, 43 degrees. That's from Adrian. Appreciate you, Adrian. Jim says he's in Lawrence. Just made sure his snowblower started, just in case.
Not a bad idea.
Just in case.
You never know.
All right.
I will say, Jim, again, nothing is ever definitive in the world of meteorology, but this should be the last time. I would say with a fair amount of confidence that after the storm passes, maybe you drain the snowblower for the year, take out the patio furniture. I'll probably regret saying that.
Absolutely.
But I think this should be the last chance.
So Sue asked about Waltham. Specifically Waltham. It's really kind of on the border of like Metro West almost versus Metro Boston.
I think it's a you probably won't see more than a coating on the grass here and there tomorrow morning, and I think Waltham's a little bit too close to the coast, a little bit too far south and east. You'll hear some sleet at times. You'll probably see some wet flakes at times tomorrow morning, but I doubt there'll be much accumulation. I think you got to get 495 area and elevation to really get into the wintry stuff.
So I'm getting a lot of comments out. Hopkinton, getting Franklin, Northbridge, some sleet. A lot of sleet falling in those areas.
Get used to it. I think it's going to be the story of the day and of the evening. Just a lot of pinging off the house and off the windshield. But again, it's not melting on contact. The actual temperatures at ground level are above freezing, so it's not like it's going to cause a glaze on everything. We're not concerned about that. It's actually not a very hazardous precipitation type in the scope of things.
A little bit of sleet mix in Mashpee now from Seaporium.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, if the precip comes down heavy enough and it doesn't have time to fully melt into the raindrops again, I guess that's probably what's happening. You get a little bit of a heavier burst and it pulls down that icy little ball that's made several thousand feet up.
I mentioned Buzzards Bay a little earlier, and Terry mentioned it, but Marjorie, want to come back to answer your question. Buzzards Bay, she says we always lose power in these type of storms. So I do think that you'll get some really gusty winds overnight. I don't think that the precipitation, especially farther south, is going to be dangerous to those areas. But certainly if the ground is soggy enough and you get those 40, 50 mile an hour winds right on Buzzards Bay, I mean, we could get a couple of trees that knock over some power lines. I don't see anything particularly special about this storm that really says, Buzzards Bay, you're definitely going to lose power.
No, in fact, we haven't really focused much on that area other than to talk about the wind and another couple inches of water. I mean, if anything, I think the story south of the Pike and over southeastern Mass and Rhode Island is just more rain, more water. A couple more inches of water. And if you've been driving around the neighborhood, I know even up where I live, like all the lakes and streams they're swollen. So a couple more inches of liquid is not necessarily a good thing. And the wind, 50, 60 mile an hour gusts right along the coasts. Sure, there could be some scattered outages, but I think the main concern is still in that heavy snow area.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is our rainfall forecast. You're talking another 1 to 3 inches of liquid water on a ground that is already
just
sopped. Every time I drive through some of the backwoods in Worcester County, like it seems like every other couple miles there's like a swamp, like a ghost forest that has been
same thing in Middlesex County. My wife and I went for a walk this weekend, and she said to me at one point, she's like, I don't remember a lake being there. I'm like, that's actually not a lake, that's just the runoff. So any of these low-lying areas, the water runs off and it just sort of sits there, and we can't get rid of it because every 3 days we're getting another rainstorm.
Exactly.
So that as we get further into spring, again, we do think the pattern may relax a little bit after this, but if we were to get a few more of these, I think we would have to start talking about some serious river flooding.
All right, so I'm still going to be monitoring Facebook for any sort of questions that come in, but I do want to focus a little bit on the solar eclipse. Just did a couple of interviews, one with ISO New England and also with NASA. We'll have some of that
cool
sound.
Stuff.
Yeah, cool stuff. Can't wait to bring that to you on WBZ and on our streaming network, CBS News Boston. This is the path of totality if you're just kind of getting plugged in, which we have people in the newsroom that are just getting plugged in.
I'm not going to mention any names.
No names at all.
A certain reporter just said, when is this happening again?
Do we need glasses?
Should I get special glasses for this?
Yeah, and we're not going to throw he or she under the bus, but this is the path of totality that literally says it there, path of totality. it's really important. If you have the means, if you have the ability to go to totality, it is the experience that it's going to be,
no doubt,
broadcast, and it's going to live up to that experience.
Yeah, you basically go from day to night in the course of a very short period of time, and it's something that many folks have described as life-changing. It's an experience unlike any other, and like we've said before, 98% is far from 100%. You really, if you're that close, it's worth the drive to get in the path of totality.
Yep.
And of course, everyone wants to know, well, are we going to be able to see it? How's the weather look on Monday?
Yeah. Let me see if we can.
So I did a graphic for Eric last night. I don't know if you can pull it up. That basically shows like the forecast cloud cover. And right now, it looks like New England may be in between two systems. So the storm system that's coming in the next couple of days is going to be very slow to depart, but we think it will move out in time. The question in my mind is up in the upper Great Lakes in the Midwest. There's going to be a cutoff low up there, and so some of those clouds, there it is right there, some of those clouds may spill over into New England, starting to make me a little nervous about Monday.
So here's what I will say, and I watched our partners at the Weather Channel, CBS News and the Weather Channel, they have a partnership. Stephanie Abrams mentioned in 2017, for days ahead, she was in the path of totality, and it was forecast to be cloudy. But just so happened those 5 minutes or whatever it was, the skies broke and she was able to see the eclipse. Put yourself in that opportunity, even if it's showing as I don't see anything glaring like precipitation wise that would really wreck the forecast. You know, if you can go to northern New England, Burlington, as you go into northern New Hampshire and into really the crown of Maine, if you can put yourself in that spot, it'll still be worth it, I think.
I think you're right. This gives us a little bit of pause because, up until yesterday, this system in the Midwest wasn't going to be that close. But if I were to, as of right now, and again, it's still several days away, I would favor Maine over Vermont, given this particular forecast. But stay tuned. If you're planning on being mobile that day, I would definitely stay tuned. Check us out over the weekend. Get an updated forecast. I wouldn't necessarily want to be going to Texas right now. I don't know if you know anybody that's doing that.
Yeah, about that.
The forecast doesn't look great down there. But again, day of, you really never know. I mean, things could change. Down that way, severe weather blows through early, and maybe you get a nice clearing.
That's what we're hoping for. So Eric and myself separately traveling to Texas, and then we have Alyssa Andrews, another meteorologist here. She's going to be traveling to Indianapolis. We're all crossing our fingers for a nice day.
Yeah, and you're going to be mobile, right?
So I've already prepped my family saying, all right, we're going to Dallas, but we may not end up in Dallas.
We may end up in Missouri, say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 6-hour trip. What's another 6 hours? But to that point, this is an experience that you're going to be able to do with your family. They're going to remember it. My kids are going to remember it. I may not be around for the next one in New England. 2079, 55 years from now. I want them to be able to pass that on. And who knows? We're going to be in the path of totality. Will we actually see it? I'm not sure. But cross our fingers.
I hope so.
Thank you.
And we'll have updates, all the next several days on the eclipse here. We want to really our focus really is on the storm right now, getting through the next, say, 24 hours, and then all our eyes will turn to forecast for next Monday.
Absolutely. So I don't see, there's a lot of like how many inches in this town versus that town. I'll put up the map once again, and you'll have to kind of pick out your towns.
Yeah, I think, again, the thing to stress is that the more elevation you have and the farther north and west you live from Boston, the better chance of snow accumulation. So northern Worcester County, if you're above 500 feet, certainly up near 1,000 feet, you're at most risk for 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of very heavy, wet, pasty snow. A little bit lower elevation into western Middlesex County, think about like Pepperell, Townsend, Westford, should be lower amounts. Again, those are the areas that we're most concerned with some sort of forecast change, though. And then closer to Boston, 128, some scattered coatings. Now, the 6 to 12 up in near Monadnock region, southwestern Cheshire County, that's a lot of wet. That's a lot of heavy.
That's heavy stuff. Yeah. This is good news for ski resorts, so.
Sure.
I mean, they've had a rough winter, to say the least.
They're making up for it in March and April.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, we're gonna go now. I'm just checking in here. Once again, want to ask for you to chime in and send us your videos, pictures, videos. We'll take it. Just tag us on Twitter, something like that, and we'll Try to share those at noontime. Jason Michael will have the forecast on WBZ. Eric will have the forecast this evening on WBZ. And we're going to be streaming all afternoon on CBS News Boston. So with that, we're going to try to do these more often, Terry. I enjoy it. It's like a little coffee talk with...
We just need a snazzy name and we're good to go.
That's the other thing. Tag us. What should we call this?
Jacob and Terry, something creative. I don't know.
Let's see. The Omega Block. We're hanging on the Omega Block. I don't know.
Too nerdy.
Yeah. Anyway, really appreciate everyone tuning in right now. We will have much more this afternoon on the storm as it evolves. For now, guys, have a good one.
Stay safe.